folks. Well, we're here. Another application season is upon us. And welcome to the Princeton Reviews, getting personal with your personal statement and making the most of your experiences. Today, we're going to use this time to really, I hope, to help you guys gain an understanding of what admissions committee members are really looking for in our personal statement, our experiences, why they're important, what's important about them. So as we go along, let's just start by first telling you a little bit about me, where I come from, what I'm talking about. Guys, I've been doing this for over 23 years. So I'm an MD, actually I'm an MD PhD, but it's kind of like I didn't ever want to get a job. So I did my undergraduate at NC State University. I went to medical school at Chapel Hill. My background is reproductive health and family planning, specifically OBGYN and family medicine. I did a master's degree in education and PhDs in physiology and pharmacology at Wake Forest before spending years working for the World Health Organization, doing third world development for STD prevention, contraceptive development, and then private practice. And then I spent almost 15 years working at an R1D1 institution counseling pre-med students. So I've been that pre-med student wanting to get into med school. And the advice I'm going to share with you today is not just based on my 23 years of doing this and the 5 admissions committees I sit on and what we see year after year, but mostly a lot of the mistakes that I made that I sort of want to help clue you guys in and help you understand tips that'll hopefully help make you as successful as possible in this process. And when it comes to there are so many mistakes that applicants make, and most of it just comes from not really knowing. So one of the things that I really want to start with is sort of talking about the application as a whole and how all the parts sort of fit in, and then maybe how you can best approach that. So today I'm going to focus on top 10 pointers for your personal statement and top 10 pointers for your experiences. But before we even get to that, because year after year after year, I get clients who are just like, I just want to write the most compelling personal statement ever. And I'm like, okay, it doesn't exist, but thanks. And the thing is, and I don't mean to burst anybody's bubble, but the personal statement is probably the least important part of your application. I can tell you that in my 23 years of sitting on admissions committees, not once has there ever been a personal statement that has crossed my desk that I went, oh my goodness, we must accept this person. And now there have been quite a few that have crossed my desk where we've been like, I have no idea what they were talking about, and a few that I've read today. But it's really understanding how all those parts fit in, and that the personal statement is supposed to give us a flavor of kind of who you are, your journey, things that are unique to you, but it's not supposed to be the end all be all, which is exactly why you've only got 5,300 characters. So before we get into all of that, what I would like to do is take a quick poll so I sort of know who's out there, what we're working with. Now, I know that quite a few of the students who are already working with me have attended this webinar, so don't worry about answering the polls if you're already an admissions counseling student. But if you're not, please answer this poll so I'll be able to answer your questions later and get back with you. And also, we're offering special discounts through my enrollment advisor that if you decide that you want to do admissions counseling with us afterwards, all you have to do is when you schedule your appointment with Matt, and his name is Matt, is say webinar, and he will know to give you additional discounts. But this is neither here nor there. Let us go now to the poll. Shall we launch the poll? All right, so let me get this. What I really want to know is if you guys could tell me a little bit about when you're planning to apply. So have you already applied and right now you're in that limbo wondering if you're going to have to reapply and let's figure out what I've done? Are you applying this upcoming cycle looking to apply in May or June, or the cycle after that or in the future? Just so I have a sense. And it looks like the majority of you guys are actually looking to apply this coming cycle, with a few of you guys kind of tailing in the other areas. But regardless, this is going to be appropriate for any of you if you're thinking about maybe what you did wrong on your application or how to get it right this time. So thank you very much for sharing with me. So let's go on to bigger topics. All right. So here's the first gist of it all. I get people who are always like, I want to write the most compelling personal statement, which is great. I mean, you do want it to be good. All right. And you do want to have the right experiences, but you got to understand what admissions committees are up against. So I need you to step out of, I am this eager pre-med wanting to get all the check boxes hit, have everything done, be the perfect application so that you will want me. Well, you means that you're in a pool of about 53,000 to 58,000 applicants on any given year. And last year, we actually included additional space. So there were 22,000 matriculates, which is up because it usually varies between about 20 and 21,000. But our average acceptance rate is always between 40 and 42%. That means 100% apply, 42% accepted, 60%, more than half, are going to get that dreaded rejection. And the average med school is going to get 10,000 applications for about 100 slots, which means you've got about a 1 in 100 chance at any given med school of getting that treasured acceptance. But more importantly, I want you to think about that 10,000 applications. So an admissions office is not thousands of people. An admissions office is usually, for most of the ones that I work in, there's like 4 to 5 of us, okay? And we're trying to get through all those applications. So you need to understand that this is not a paper trail. We're not hand pouring over all of these. First steps are basically electronic screens. So what we see is we've got this 40% accepted, 60% denied. And of this 60% denied, 50% of these kids have a GPA and an Mcat that we're typically looking for. When we talk about that GPA or Mcat, we're saying that the average acceptance at GPA is between 365 and 375. Now, that doesn't mean if your GPA is a little bit below that, you're not going to get in, but you need to have the other things to balance it. And that first screen for 10,000 is a school looks at what their core parameters are for Mcat. So every med school, you check the MSAR, you check the ACOMA sites, you see that every school has what they call their median Mcat score, and that's really what you should focus on when you're determining your school list. Yes, there is a range. There is a range that will always be extreme, from like 490 up to 525 and above, but you want to look at their average because that's generally what their screening parameters are on. So like at UNC Chapel Hill last year, our median Mcat was 515. That's going to go up this year. We're screening in a range of 2 to 3 points above and below that, especially for in-state applicants. Out-of-state applicants, that screen's going to be even higher. So when you're determining your school list, go to the median, look at your own Mcat score, and figure out where you fall for that. Reach schools should typically not be more than 3 points above the school's median Mcat and your median Mcat. So if a school's median Mcat, if your Mcat is a 512 and the school's median Mcat is like a 515, 516, that's going to be a reach school for you. A target school would be 1 or 2 points on each side of your Mcat score, and what we call a safety school, there is no such thing because we got 40% acceptance rate, is going to be 2 or 3 points below that. Same thing for the average GPA. We talked about the GPA average being about 365 to 375. Schools tend to vary on that. Your core GPA should be about 0.1 within that. So like a 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, wherever you fall around that, when you're determining your school list, because the first line screen will be to look at your GPA and your Mcat in an electronic screen. Do you fall in their parameters? And do you have any special like underserved categories, special nationalities, things like that, that might allow them to skew a little bit past that? Now, here's the thing. The second line screen is not that precious personal statement that you guys are all focusing so much on. People spend so much time focusing on the personal statement and forget all the other things they need to get together. And the second line screen is an electronic screen on your experiences. Now, let me explain how this happens. and a COMAS and any application service tells you to list all of your experiences. Those have been those check boxes that you guys have been sort of trying to work through. So when you're thinking about your experiences, what I always say is sit down and write them all out. Write down everything that you've done, and then sort of start to group it into different categories. Now, at the AdCom level, we're typically looking at what we sort of call 5 core parameters, which are your academic attributes outside of your GPA and your Mcat, which are things like how much research have you done? Last year, the average research was just shy of 1,300 hours. That's a lot of research. Most of my students tend to be between 300 and 500 hours, but we're generally saying like a full year of research in a lab. Ideally wet lab, meaning benchtop research or something with clinical applications with patients. Research is not required, but highly beneficial. And the reason is, and when we talk about experiences, AMCAS has what they call their 15 core competencies. It annoys the mess out of me because there are 15 experiences and 15 core competencies. Guys, that is not a one-to-one correlation. You may have one experience, and I'm going to give you an example. Let's talk about research. In your research in your lab, you may have an opportunity to do your research. So that may be part of AMCAS's core competencies of critical thinking and experimental design. But maybe new people come into the lab and you train new people coming into the lab. That also qualifies with teaching and tutoring, communication. Maybe you have the opportunity to present in the lab. There, once again, what we get is presentation, communication skills. Maybe you've done a publication. That is one of the core competencies that we list. So there are lots of different categories. So AMCAS has categories where you will categorize everything like unpaid clinical, volunteer, service, leadership, etc. And then they've got their core competencies. So the first thing you want to do is list everything out. Then decide, taking AMCAS or ACOMAS's core categories, like unpaid service, clinical, which ones are going to fit into each category. Okay, first stop. Then you want to look at what you've done with each particular experience, like we talked about your research, and which of those core competencies are you going to talk about in your experience? Because what happens is, when it goes through that electronic screen, it gives us a grid, and it rates clinical experience, research experience, service experience, leadership, hobbies, and other things, what we call the big 5, okay? Academic, clinical, service, leadership, and social. And it's going to break it into a grid that says they've got X number of hours of shadowing over 3 years in these different categories. They've got 5 different service things in this area. You guys go, why is that important? I'm going to give you an example. I have a client that I worked with 2 years ago. He had a 524 Mcat, he had a 4.0 GPA, and had done wonderful things throughout his application. But when he filled out his experiences, that did not reflect. He didn't group things appropriately or for periods of time. So for instance, he volunteered with hospice for 4 years for almost 4,000 hours, 30 hours a week. But when he listed his experience, he gave one date, the end date versus the time, and he listed it as 30 hours versus 30 hours per week. So when his grid spit out, it looked like he had a beautiful GPA and a beautiful MCAT, but essentially no service. He was actually denied from one of the programs I review for. I remember talking to the dean saying, why did you guys deny him? And he was like, he doesn't have enough service. And then we realized what was going on. He was given a secondary application and is actually in med school today. So maximize your chances by 1, knowing who you are, 2, knowing what you bring to the table. And that's actually going to come to where we talk about your personal statement, because we've already talked about that there are tens of thousands of people going through this process. Okay, and you've all done the same things, which is great because you've got to have the research, you've got to have the cultural appreciation. We want to see the teaching and tutoring. We want to know that you have clinical shadowing experience and ideally hands-on patient contact, that you've done leadership, that you've got a host of service. But What have you done that makes you unique? And that comes to creating your brand. And it is creating your brand, knowing who you are as an applicant is what you want to articulate in your personal statement. If you are a college athlete, and that's a good thing, I mean, because you have to balance the time and the commitment for your sport and your academics or whatever, but it can't be your whole brand. Your personal statement cannot be basketball, 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 basketball taught me this and basketball taught me that, and it's going to, because we just tune you out. Your personal statement also should not be a bunch of my journey to medicine started with, and it has taught me. You need to demonstrate, not just tell. So you've got to know what about your journey makes you unique, how you present that, and where it has it taken you. So when you're writing your personal statement, you need to sit down and think about it like you are watching a movie trailer. When you go to the movies and they show all those coming previews, it's like little snippets of that entire movie. That's your personal statement. And do those snippets go, I got to watch that movie, or I have no idea what that was about. And way too many of them tend to drift onto that area. So, right now, with my clients that I'm working with, we're in the midst of reviewing the personal statements. And this is where a lot of people run into trouble because I get tons of people rolling in April and May going, applications opening, I'm ready to do my stuff. Well, you spend an average of 6 months preparing for the Mcat. You should invest the same amount of time in your personal statement and your experiences, your primary application. So what I always do is my folks have been brainstorming their personal statement and their experiences since before Christmas. We're doing first reviews this month and next month, second reviews in March, third reviews in February, so that come May, that stuff's already done and finalized. I've already got my folks out there getting their letters of recommendation, whether they're using a school committee or they're gathering them on their own through a letter gathering service. You should be connecting with people right now. You should be asking for letters of recommendation and ask them to if you're planning on applying this cycle, give them a deadline of April 30th, unless your school's review committee has a different deadline. But April 30th gives you time to be on top of them and to get followed up with them before many professors peace out for the summer. And it still gives you a month before applications open for submission. The other thing is you don't have to have all your letters in at the time you submit. They can come in afterwards, but many programs will not review you until they're all in. So you should be drafting that personal statement, drafting those experiences, putting together your letters of recommendation, and starting to formulate your school list based on your GPA and your Mcat so that you're ready. So come May, you key in that application, you type it all in, you send your transcripts. I always recommend that my students use the month between when they submit and when secondaries come out around the 1st of July to start pre-writing secondary essays. People put so much emphasis on the freaking primary application and then just blow off the secondaries. And the secondaries are the opportunity for you to tell your additional part of your story and how you fit with that school. So oftentimes I will sit down with a personal statement and somebody's secondary to kind of see the heart of who they are, and then look at their experiences grid to get an idea of what they've actually done for the interviews I do. Because your hope is that by August, and running August through January or February, you'll be interviewing for those coveted spots. The other mistake I get from folks, guys, this ain't like college, okay? You don't take your SAT in the summer, submit your application in October, and magically we're starting now, and you won't have a decision until next April 30th. And it is a very long process. Interviews are still in full swing. Acceptances are trickling out, but they will run anywhere through April, and you've got to be patient. A great year is apply to 20 schools to get 5 interviews for 1 acceptance. It is very, very different from college. So let's talk first about the personal statement, because I know that's everybody's mojo. Everybody wants to know about the personal statement. So let's figure out what makes a good personal statement. Now, I've already told you, much like you're already writing out your experiences, you want to sit down and outline what are your key concepts of your personal statement. So a base personal statement Okay, and again, it's 5,300 characters with spaces. It is not your life history. Okay, so it's going to be 5 to 6 paragraphs max. The first paragraph has got to be that trailer that catches me. It has got to be some type of catch that gets my attention, that is going to weave to the theme of your other 3 to 4 supporting paragraphs. Then your final paragraph needs to tie this together with some reference of where you started. I read one the other week and it was like beautifully tied together. And then I got this last paragraph and I was like, is this the same personal statement? Because it had nothing to do with the rest of the personal statement. And all it did was lead to confusion. So let's talk. The first, you should start now. You actually should have started in November, December, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. We ain't got that. You need to write, rewrite, let it sit, and rewrite it again. My father always taught me, and he was an amazing writer. Okay, you write out whatever you got to say. You put your heart, your soul into it. You set it down for 24, 48 hours. You come back to it, you pick it up, you rewrite it. You set it down for a minimum of 24 hours. Don't reread the same thing. But the problem is when you reread it too many times, then you start to overlook things. So I always say that you should write, rewrite, rewrite it again. Have other people read it for you, but have people who do not know you read it to make sure it makes sense. I reviewed one yesterday who was somebody was like reflecting back about doing something, basically sitting in a tree hunting for deer, but he talked about the years have passed. Well, I had no idea how many years had passed. So, sitting in that cold tree in the deep shallows of the swamp, in 2018, I remember put it in context. Let me know where it is, who it was, what you were doing. And a lot of times you know your journey, but I get people who all the time go, well, but they have my experiences and I can barely get my students to read the emails I send them. Never, ever assume. Now, this big point right here is the out the gate thing I want to say. Back off the cliches, okay? I got one a couple of days ago, started with my journey to medicine, and I immediately quit reading because my journey to medicine, why I want to be a doctor, I want to help and serve and science, and somebody died and blah, blah, blah. I mean, those are all the reasons that we've already talked about that you should be going into healthcare. But don't tell me you want to help and serve. Show me in your description of things you've done how you do help. Show me that scientific inquiry through the research you've done or something you figured out. If you've had something impactful that happened to you, I had somebody yesterday who talked about coming home from school and being focused on how hungry he was and worried about his homework, only to turn around and see his mom and discover that she had been diagnosed with cancer. And that's impactful, but then being able to relate the journey of the impact of cancer on a family, or the importance of communication from the physician and how you use that in the future. Find ways to weave it together so that we understand that you understand. And that's the biggest thing. Be interesting. And it has been a plethora of, oh my goodness, it is so not interesting. Remember, admissions committees are not looking for you to have some epiphany. They are not looking for some enlightening thing we have ever heard. They are looking for a new view on who you are. What is your brand? Okay, are you a first generation American who learned what it was like to endure racism or comments or whatever? Have you struggled throughout your growth? Have there been things that have helped you be able to really connect with other people? What is your brand? And that's going to be your brand through your personal statement, through your experiences, through your secondary, because that's what we're looking for. Because remember, on the AdCom side, I'm not only looking, have you hit all those checkbox, I'm looking to see how you're going to fit into a class, what kind of classmate you're going to be, what unique attributes would you bring to our clinical setting. And that's really, really important, tying those together in that brand that you create and telling it in your personal statement. and I just said this, show, don't tell. I mean, the first thing I do is scan a personal statement and I see how many times they use I gained, I did this, I did that. Be creative. Don't play the politician. I am compassionate and want to help others. Prove it. Use active tone, such as rather than saying something like, I worked at a camp throughout high school. You might start with serving as a counselor at camp such and such in New York for child cancer survivors really helped me understand. Use different words, use active tense, use different flow to show and conceptualize the same thing. Also, we are going to talk about, please do not ramble and do not beat me to death with the same topics. Back again, back again, back again, back again. I get over and over and over. I actually was doing one this week about somebody who was a hockey player. And 5 times in the same essay, he talked about his coach teaching him to keep his eye on the puck to hit it in the goal. And over time, I learned that I kept my eye on the puck to hit it in the goal. I didn't even know where that was going and how it related to the personal statement, but 5 times in a 5 paragraphs, it was beating me to death. So choose your words carefully, use active tone, use words that show action rather than I got the opportunity. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to use words that show a more polished effect and avoid 5-line sentences and using those active words. My husband is a 4th grade school teacher, and on a daily basis, I sit beside him and go, please teach your students to find a period. Sometimes I will have an entire paragraph that is 1 sentence. Who taught y'all to write like that? Okay, if I have to take a breath in the process of reading your sentence is probably too long. If your sentence is more than 3 typed lines, and that's pushing it, okay, it's probably too long. Cut it apart, start with an active tense. Nobody has the capacity to keep someone's attention that long. If you have weaknesses, okay, if there is something, maybe you have a lower GPA because you lost a family member, something tragically happened, and Lord knows we've seen enough with that with COVID. Okay, if something has happened that has impacted your journey, address it and move on. And you could start with, early on, I struggled academically, not only with my adjustment to college, but losing my mother and having to work full time to support my expenses would take its toll on my education. Boom, that's fine. I learned, regrouped, and have been able to do this. You move on. If you are a re-applicant, you must include at least 1 paragraph, preferably at the end, that talks about something along the lines of, although I would have loved to have received an acceptance during my first application cycle, this additional time has allowed me to boom, 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 boom. How you're a better, stronger, more educated applicant with that time. Transitions. So we've got 5 to 6 paragraphs, okay? Sometimes people are writing and then they just switch train of thought and it's like getting hit by a bus. So you don't have to have a full, complete lead in. And I really hate those. From that time, I had many other experiences that would further fortify my understanding of medicine. And I'm like going, no, not a transition. That's just beating me over the head with, I want to be a doctor. And by the way, use physician, not doctor. Use mother and father, not mom and dad. And do not, when you are writing, use Mr. X or Mr. T or whatever, okay, you fool, because, and I just stated myself if any of you guys have never seen the A-Team, but you should use names, preferably small names, because we've got characters. They don't have to be the real names, but it is much more personable. If you say, while volunteering with the Special Olympics, I met Sue. Her name may have been Elizabeth, but we're calling her Sue because that's only 3 letters. She was a bright-eyed blah, 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 blah. Make it personal. But I will tell you, Mr. T, Mr. Z, Dr. M, whatever is distracting. If your research professor's name was Dr. Mello, call him Dr. Mello, not Dr. M. It does not matter. You are not violating confidentiality. Now, if you go in and say Sue Smith of such and such Wichita, yes, that is violating confidentiality. But if you just say I met Sue, that does not. Okay, use your active voice. And please don't ever talk in third person. Got one last week where somebody wrote the entire essay in third person. She said this, she did that. And I'm like, is this yours or somebody else's? So always use an active voice. Again, like I gave you examples of, working at the country club enabled me to interact with a diverse population of people, including da 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 da. An active voice. You were doing. This is what you did. We love to see a personal statement. It is going to come across as much more engaging and connectful if you use that active voice. All right. Now, like I said, seek multiple opinions before you hit submit. And Lord knows for my people who are watching, before you send it to me, okay, you need to be able to follow your train of thought. So it's great to have your family members read it. It is great to have people who have an associated, but it would be wonderful to have somebody who doesn't know jack boo squat about you. And then let them read it and see if they can tell you something about you, what they think is unique, and did it catch their attention? Because they will catch those hiccups, the glimpses, the little hiccups where you've said something, but you didn't give enough information. If you talk about your mother having cancer, let me know what type of cancer, when it was, what the outcome was. If you talk about things that you were doing, put it in the context of a year. Like since my freshman year of college, I started working in such and such, and in 2018, I met such and such. Give me just enough words so that I feel like I'm there, and then create a visual. Use something simple that says, I softly took her hand, and as she looked up at me, a single tear dripped from her eye. Something that gives me a visual so that I feel like I am there. Focus. Keep your focus. It should highlight interesting aspects of your journey, not your entire life. 5,300 characters, all you got. You've got 15 experiences to give more detail. You're going to have secondary essays to give more detail. You're going to have interviews to give more detail. This is to show your brand. Figure out what it is, outline it, tell it. And be mindful of the 4 R's. Not really an R, but we're making it an R, which is right. All right. Review everything about it. Revise, that means set it down, come back to it, revise it, set it down, repeat. Rinse, wash, repeat. This is why this is not something that can be developed at the 11th hour in April. This needs to be happening right now. So if you guys are not already on it, please jump on getting it happen. So remember, watch your word count, okay? 5,300 characters. That's going to take you somewhere between about 850 and 950 words, okay? Take a systematic approach, outline it, figure out what's going to be your catch, and then pick out 3 to 4 key things about you. Ideally, I'm looking for something that has some type of clinical application, some type of service reference, and if you've done research or something unique, work, something different in your journey, carve that in there. And so that we get hints of things you've done. Again, outline first, use a 5 to 6 paragraph approach. First is a catch, good transitions to 3 to 4 things you've done, and a concluding paragraph that references where you started and gives almost like a challenge for going forward, what you look forward to, how you prepared yourself, and how you know this is the right fit for you. Now, remember I told you that your experiences are actually ultimately more important than your personal statement, because your experiences are going to reflect those check boxes that all pre-meds are so anxious about hitting all of them about. And I cannot stress this enough. And when I get clients in, the first thing we do is look at those 5 categories that we talked about: the academic things they've done, how much research do they have, 1 semester, 2 semesters, how much, how long, did they do in their lab, have they taught other people, have they led their own project, whatever. When we talk about study abroad, I'm really not looking for their study abroad, I'm looking for their cultural appreciation. So have they traveled? Are they first generation? Have they worked with underserved populations? Have they done a study abroad or a mission trip? Things that have exposed them to people outside the academic institution. It's the reason that med schools love gap year students. We love the student who's left the academic bubble, gotten a job, taken time to work with other people, exist, taken a breather, done different things, things that will make you unique. Okay. Have you taught, tutored, worked as a TA, educated other people, anything where you've had to break down complicated information? That could mean maybe you are an athlete and you've coached other people. Maybe you are a chef at a restaurant and you've trained other people to cook different recipes. Maybe you've worked as a TA in a class. Maybe you've taught and mentored and tutored underserved kids. We love that. Reach out to your local Boys and Girls Club. Check your school institutions. Find ways to help people outside your comfort zone. Because as a future physician, you can be the greatest physician in the world, but if you can't educate your patients about what's wrong with them, how to fix it once they leave the walls of your clinic, your words and your treatment can prove to be futile. If they don't understand why they're sick, the importance of their medication, how to take it, why they got sick, they're only going to start to reproduce those. Now, again, I am countlessly amazed at how many people come to me when we're talking about these experiences, wanting to be a physician with so little clinical experience. And I know it's been hard with COVID, don't get me wrong, but there are virtual shadowing opportunities out there. You can volunteer in free clinics, you can take international mission trips, you can budget time to try to schedule time to shadow physicians that you know for brief periods of time, like a couple of half days. You can volunteer in a hospital, which is great service and interacting with patients, but also use the areas of hospital where you are working to sort of shadow or tag behind physicians you're working with. Ask questions at the front desk. Talk to people when you're at the nurse's station. Use that to gain the shadowing hours you didn't realize, and then bolster that with, be it paid or unpaid, roll up your sleeves, as Dr. Bashford, my former mentor, used to say, and get involved. Work as an MA in a nursing home, in a practice. Become a volunteer scribe at a free clinic. Get a paid job as a clinical scribe. Use your time to show us that you've done more in I want to be a doctor than just go, yeah, I've always wanted to help people. I had a Barbie that I always tried to take care of. What have you done in your adult life to take care of people? Leadership. What leadership roles have you taken on? Have you headed programs? Have you founded programs? Have you led your own project in the lab? Things that show that you can effectively lead other people, be it in your practice, be it your patients, be it your fellow students. And most importantly, because probably the 2 biggest areas my people lack on is enough clinical and enough service. Time after time after time. And I will tell you, of all the rejection reviews I did last year, I did not have a single student with below a 518 Mcat and below a 3.8 GPA. Every one of them failed to gain acceptances because they either applied too late, their attempts at putting in their experiences and their personal statement were very shabby, but most commonly, they didn't have the experiences they need. And I get that nobody wants to take a gap year. Nobody wants to wait, but we're talking about the rest of your life versus investing 1 more year and being the kind of applicant you want to be, because you've got to stand out in a pool of 10,000 people who are competing just as hard for that. You think about those people, the Olympics are coming up next month, who have trained their lifetime for that coveted spot, to earn a spot on the Olympic team. Hundreds of thousands of people wanted to get to that spot, but only a few can make that. And that comes from the dedication, being unique, having that unique move, component, talent to help you stand out. So the first thing, as we talked about, is AMCAS has those 15 core competencies. At 2 of the schools now that I review for, we literally take your 15 experiences and make sure that somewhere in your writing, I see that you have shown some of these core competencies. The reason why research is so important is AMCAS generally thinks that critical thinking and scientific inquiry can only be achieved through research. So you're definitely going to have to find a way to make sure you demonstrate that. Now, every meaningful experience has, whether or not it's most meaningful, you're going to get 3 of those where you get an additional 1,325 characters to write about something that was enriching to you. Ideally, 1 should be clinical and 1 should be service if possible. And if you've done enough research, 1 is likely going to be research. You pick one of the core AMCAS categories. Experience name. Now, this is critical. Name it something that will catch the attention of me, of what you did. So founder of my own self-tutoring group dash mindful lives, and then maybe in parentheses ML, because that's going to be my abbreviation, because this tells me that it was a leadership position, you founded something, what you founded, we gave a title, and then anytime you can use your experiences, be it in the experience name or the organization name, to put the full name and do an abbreviation saves you characters down below when you're writing it. Date should be all encompassing. Again, remember, we're going to be screening for length of time. So you can't count things from high school unless you started it in high school and continued it into college. So maybe you did a bunch of shadowing in high school. If you can come back and reshadow those same people in college, then we can count that time span. That's how you get around that. Nothing in the future can count, so no future dates for AMCAS. Your total number of hours need to be realistic. And by the way, if you did a study abroad, that is not your entire hour study abroad. That was time that you were in class or doing things. Again, organization name, title, phone, email, contact. It is very important to be doing all this. Now, in your description, you're going to get 700 characters, okay? And we have these categories of things that we can select them in. So remember I told you. Now, there are 15 experiences. When you count everything out, I always encourage my students to group all of their shadowing into one experience. That will give you more shadowing hours, a greater length of time, and a lot more to write about. When you ask about your contact, that should either be the person you shadowed with the most, someone who could speak for you, or an academic advisor. So sometimes maybe if you've written everything out and you're having to group stuff together, like college service, to get to 15 experiences, you may have done enough. By the way, that means without putting 5 hobbies in. I had somebody the other day who had 9 experiences, 5 hobbies. I was like, no, you have not done enough. And conferences attended, ideally, should also all be grouped together if you do those. Similar for publications, you can list them separately, but you don't want 5 of your 15 to be separate publications. So really focus on how you group these together. Now, the other side of this, if you write everything out, you're not grouping, and you're having to like separate all your shadowing to come up with 12 experiences, and 12 is generally my cutoff. Below 12 experiences is an immediate red flag to most committees that you have not done enough. So ideally, you want 15 that you're having to group together. Now, in terms of those 700 characters or those 3 most meaningful, this is so important, okay? Avoid the overuse of I, by the way, but it should be who, what, and how. Who the organization was and what was your role and what you accomplished, okay? So it may be volunteering with Big Brother, Big Sister, or BBBS as a mentor for the past 5 years has helped me to. Mac was my student, Mac was my mentee. He ultimately taught me more than I ever realized. He did this and this and this. And then your final statement should be a reflection on how this has made you a better person. Please avoid saying, as a future physician, this will help me better communicate. Okay, if I read one more, as a future physician, okay, the lessons learned as a mentee have always have taught me not only how to better empathize with other struggles, but to understand the person that exists beyond what I see directly in front of me. This will be very important with my future patients, whatever. Okay, so what the organization was, what your role was, what you did, and then how you grew from it. Your experiences should be written with the same care and attention as your personal statement. I see that time and time again. So describe what you did, not the generic position description. Focus on your passions, what you learned, how it helped you. Give me stories if you have the context to be able to reflect what you learned from that. Do not write just to fill up the box. Sometimes less is more. We don't expect they've all got to be exactly 700. Sometimes it may take you 400 characters. Sometimes you're struggling to get it down to 700. Be sure to include how you grew from it and learned from your experience. This is very, very important because these whole experiences are supposed to be helping you know you want to be a doctor. Describe how it fits into your medical future to benefit you. I further honed my communication and time management skills by working full time throughout my academic career as a hostess or whatever. Use a specific story if space allows to demonstrate, not tell. All right, make a list of everything you can think of, split them out by categories, as I said, and then start grouping everything together. Again, you should be doing this right now. It's funny because everybody loves to send me their personal statements and they struggle to write their experiences, and it's typically painful. And if you will follow this process and approach each little essay you're writing, like writing an essay, writing a paragraph of your personal statement, you will do much better. All right. If greater than 15, combine. If less than 15, recheck and think about anything you're missing. If less than 12, start gropping. If less than 9, you are seriously not ready. All right. Just say no to high school. Again, we talked about this. Unless you continued it into college, nothing from high school except Boy Scout and Gold Award can be listed on your application. Strive for accuracy, okay? Because this may very well come up in your interview. More and more interviews are going to open file where we are literally sitting down with that experiences spreadsheet, and we will call you out to ask you about those things that you talked about. Be selective about your most meaningful, okay? Ideally, like I said, look for a service and a clinical, but also look for things that have been very important in your journey to you. Switch up the wording. I cannot express this enough. Like I said, use physician, not doctor, okay? Avoid saying, as a future physician, this will help. You want to show what you gained from it and how you grew from it. That's the key thing. All right, and show growth and understanding. Advocate for yourself. Maybe you're talking about your research lab, and you talk about that early on you spent weeks trying to perfect a technique only to basically have it blow up in your face, and the sort of the humility you gained when your research professor pulled you aside and said, you know, you're going to have to get this together. And trust me, had that happen to me. If any of you guys have worked with me and you've watched my video where I talk about my experience with Bob the Bass in the research lab, for those who don't know me, very comical research study, but basically where I inadvertently fed thousands of dollars of research frogs to our lab bass, who was also a part of another research study, because I mistook them for the feeder frogs. And when my research professor came in and yelled for me to stop, I was still feeding the bass a frog, and I had it over the aquarium, and the bass jumped out, grabbed my hand, because that's what bass do, and I screamed and threw the poor bass all the way across the research lab. He did survive. Don't worry, don't call PETA people on me. But my research professor pulled me aside and said, you've got to understand what's going on here and what your role is in this lab. We had 3 much better years together. That was my freshman year. But learn Talk about how you learned from your mistakes and how you grew. Choose relevant things, relevant in your journey, and that will reflect your ability to demonstrate your commitment to service, your understanding from your clinical experiences, your ability to lead others, your ability to communicate. Pick relevant things. Again, why it is so important to start going through that list. Know the format, okay? Again, I gave you lots of tips for keying in the title area what you want to do. This is not a resume, okay? It should be in 15 individual paragraphs. It should be 15 little individual stories or reflections that tell who you are, okay? And avoid the fluff. I cannot even explain this. Summarize, be clear and concise so I can quickly skim it. An average admissions committee member, when we actually get an application in front of us, will spend essentially anywhere from 2 to 3.5 minutes reviewing an entire application. This is why when I get the student who goes, oh dear God, I made a C in chemistry, I'm like, we're not looking at it. We are looking at your overall, anything that stands out, skimming that personal statement to see if it catches my attention, and skimming these experiences for the number of things you've done and the roles you've had. So set yourself up for an interview. Leave me with interesting stories that make me want to know about you. So I want to leave the last 10 minutes of our webinar so I can answer questions for you guys. Before I do, I wanted to do a quick poll to see if you guys would like any more information. So here at TPR, you know that we can help prepare you for your Mcat. So if you guys are interested in any additional help with your Mcat, again, my folks, y'all don't need to answer this, but if you want information on how to put together an application that meets all these things, it's going to catch my attention, and would be interested in working with me or working with one of our other experts on one of our other packages, click that button so we can reach back out to you to talk to you a little bit about our admissions packages. And also, if you're struggling, if you're not ready to apply, but you're struggling in any of your classes, we have tutor.com that has ways to help you improve your GPA and help you with your prerequisites. So thank you so much for that. And let me get to here. So again, we can help you get those great grades you want with our TPR tutor.com services. Our great test prep, be it our 515, 510, self-paced, any of our classes to help you succeed, and with our admissions counseling. And guys, that's the most important part, truly, and how you take all of these parts, put it together, stay on task, make sure that personal statement, that experiences, those secondary essays. And right now, as I am in the heart of interviewing, helping you know the oh Lord, oh no, I didn't mistakes that you make in interviewing. Come to my July webinar. We'll talk more about that. Okay, so we can help you with your primary application, but as I've already talked to you guys about, this is a year-long process. It's your primary, it's your secondary, it's your interview, it's the follow-up, it's all parts of it. And we can help you with anything start to finish, be it working directly with me or one of my other experts. If you want to go to the our website, our admissions website, we actually have a quiz that would help you with if you wanted to talk to Matt. And actually at the very top of our admissions counseling page, there's a little box where you can schedule a time to learn more. By the way, this webinar will be sent to anybody who registered, so it'll give you an opportunity to kind of go back through all this information. So if you guys have any questions, let me, come on, give me questions. Here. And here, if you have any questions, if you can post them here. So, oh, no, that was that one. Are all secondaries released 1 month after the primary application? Actually, they're not. There are two different ways. So the things I need you guys to think about. So applications open for AMCAS for submission the end of May, 1st of June. It varies year to year. They haven't told us this year, but it'll be somewhere in that time frame. And when you submit, that entire first 4, 5, 6 weeks is nothing but AMCAS reviewing your application, getting it ready for what we call verification, ready for schools. No schools have access to your application until the end of June, 1st of July, when AMCAS makes those resources available makes all applications that anybody applied to available to the schools. Currently, about 90% of schools are automatically generating secondaries, which means they send those secondaries never even looking at your application. So please be wary of that. I can guarantee you that every single website or admissions committee or that secondary, somewhere on it says, if you don't meet our screening criteria, this will not be processed. Two of the schools that I worked with last year did not open more than 50% of their secondaries because they did not meet their criteria. Choose your schools selectively. A few schools, though, still wait until your application is complete, like your secondaries are in, until your application is complete in terms of your letters of recommendation and Mcat before they send secondaries. And then a very few schools whittle them down now, not many. Does the college you come from matter? Sorry, I apologize. A little bit. Okay, so let me qualify this. Just because you went to Duke or Cornell or whatever does not give you the golden ticket. If you don't have the GPA or the Mcat to make it through the screen, it doesn't matter where you went. Okay, now when it comes down to taking everybody who meets our criteria, there is a slight hesitancy. We don't like community college grades, especially in core prerequisites. And there is a slight disadvantage if you went to a very small, non-prestigious, not highly ranked school, but only a small amount. Overall, if you're doing well enough on the Mcat, that's why the Mcat's weighted so heavily, we figure you have the content knowledge. Now, with that in mind, when does a school come down? If we're on the admissions committee and we've got two identical candidates, both with essentially the same GPA, same experiences, and both get the same rankings in their interview, and we've only got one slot left and one person went maybe to like Duke or Harvard and the other one went to their community college, yes, then it will matter, but only when you get to those selective parts. Thoughts on how to spend a gap year, master's versus travel versus work. This totally depends on what your weaknesses is. So if you've got a 3.8, 3.9 GPA, for the love of Pete, don't invest the money in a master's. You don't need one. And I'm going to tell you, if you get below a 3.6 or a 3.7, and there are several master's programs that are GPA killers out there, I know a few, it's like a death sentence, okay? If you're low on clinical experience or don't have paid clinical, use your gap year to do that. If you have not gained enough cultural exposure, spend part of your time traveling and part of it getting clinical. So look at the areas you're weak on, almost without fail though. If you're taking a gap year, regardless of what you're doing, keep a commitment to service. Stay engaged in at least 2 to 3 service things during that time. How long does it truly take to prepare for the Mcat to be confident, and how should I approach it? You know, everybody's really different on this because some people say I studied for 6 months, some say I studied for 6 weeks. I think it's somewhere in between. Both of my kids, when they prepared for the Mcat, chose, and I love this approach if you have the opportunity, which is they took a period during the summer when they weren't taking other courses, and one took a 3-week course and one took a 5-week course, something very intense, so they really nailed down the core review. But the most important part is having enough time to do as many practice problems and as many practice tests as possible. My kids both did all the practice tests twice. And that's probably the biggest mistake I see people making, going into the Mcat not having only done 3 or 4 practice tests. You would never wake up one morning and say, I'm going to go run a marathon today. You will train ideally for at least 3 to 6 months to a year. So you want to set yourself a time schedule where, and I generally say somewhere between 3 and 5 months is a good period of time. That's oftentimes where I will have people who go, I did the winter boot camp and I'm going to test in January. And I'm like, good luck to you, because that's going to be tough. You really need the time to get the content in and then practice solving the problems in the passages, because that's the key to success. So get your core content content knowledge reviewed. So you've got your formulas, your basics and understanding, and then really start attacking problem set after problem set. Because the way it's structured, two of the questions you really don't need a lot of knowledge. You should be able to answer from the passage. Two of the questions you need that basic foundational information. That's about your 5.9, 5.10 range. But to get you to that 5.15 and above, it's really knowing how to answer those last two. That's that higher level of thinking. I mentioned experience section to tell a story, but also to avoid fluff. Exactly how do you balance that to tell a story or not? And that really is, that's part of what you're talking about, how you balance telling a story without doing too much fluff. So the research example I gave you, I think is a good one. That you entered the lab as a freshman, that you first had to really learn the basics. You spent 6 weeks perfecting this only to have this fail. You kind of get this humility where you reapproached. Or let's talk about maybe being a mentor. Okay. When I was a mentor with Big Brother, Big Sister, my mentee always wanted to come to my house because she did not have a father figure. So she wanted to spend time with my husband, and she wanted to play with our dog because she always wanted a dog. And I sort of talked about, how you talk about reflecting on things that we may take for granted can mean so much to somebody else, and taking the time to understand them and then sharing. So whenever she came over, all we did was play with the dog, took the dog out on the boat, played with the dog, whatever, understanding who somebody is to better connect with them. That's how you use it without fluffing. Can we find examples? Where can we find examples of secondary prompts? They are almost always posted on a yearly basis. We always compile all our secondary essays, and we can typically find them online, which are references to like former secondary prompts. I'm going to go ahead and say this. Please avoid studentdoctor.net. Unless you're specifically looking for something like prior year prompts or something like that, because I've often said, it is like a feast fed for lies and deception, where there's other power hungry gunner pre-meds spilling all kinds of lies and deception. Also, have you heard of Uniform Service University? Absolutely. I've heard it, get people in there all the time. School route for an air source doctor. Should I be more involved in community, like I'm living in community service? Okay, so are you specifically interested in just uniform services? Oftentimes say like prior military, people who've done ROTC and things like that, or had some historic military involvement throughout college, but that is not required. But between uniform services as well as the HPSP scholarship programs, both phenomenal ways to get your education, especially if you're looking to be engaged in military service in the future. But I will tell you that there is a huge, huge focus on community service and understanding. So absolutely, if that's the route that you're looking to take, definitely look at that. Also, I see that you're interested in being an Air Force physician. So definitely also check out the Air Force HPSP scholarships. How can we get in contact to reach out with you for questions? So we just posted if there are additional questions. I'm going to try to answer all of them here at questions@review.com. The other thing is, if you schedule a time if you take this quiz and schedule a time with Matt for him to go through that information with you and where you are, if there are additional questions, he can also reach out to me. Are pandemic gap years being seen differently? Are medical schools looking for you to be active from the start to the end? Gap years, we're giving, as we know, some latitude for taking classes online, and maybe not having to combine virtual experience with in-person experience. But what we're not giving latitude for is not doing things until the last minute. So not doing any service up until now. Well, there have been different service endeavors that people could get involved in, be it COVID outreach, be it virtual tutoring, be it volunteering on crisis lines. So there are still avenues for people to gain and acquire experience. So we're giving some latitude for like online classes where people have had to, or gaps in time or whatever, but we're still expecting to see the core requirements. I'm going to school Air Force. I was thinking maybe it would be more easier for acceptance. Do you think? Oh, yes. So you're going to Air Force ROTC route and trying to compete for the scholarship. Yes, this will absolutely really help you in applying to those programs. And their essays specifically sort of tailor to that dedication to service and your understanding of the commitment that being a military physician embodies. All right. I think I got to them all. Well, guys, you have been great. You've had some wonderful questions. Again, I encourage you to go to the website, take the quiz, and schedule a time to sign up with Matt, especially if you're applying this year, because you are short on time already. It's hard to believe that we're just getting started and I'm already telling you you're short on time. Also, go to the website, to our webinar website, and sign up for my April workshop that will talk to you about the keys to being the most successful applicant. I'm going to talk about the most common mistakes that my applicants make every year that keep them in that 60% denied range, and how you can cross over to be in that 40th percentile. And in July, we'll be talking about secondary issues and secondary essays and interview prep. So thanks so much for your time. Have a good one.